Greetings and welcome back to the Blue Saints podcast for episode 6. Today, we have a special episode, and we're going to sit down with Julie, Jim, and Jerel, the children of Jim Sackett, who was killed in the line of duty on May 22nd in 1970. The case went cold for 35 years, and due to some aggressive investigative journalism by Tom Hauser, some really good work by some tremendous former St. Paul Police Federation members and investigators, Sergeant Tom Danaski, Sergeant Jane Mead, Sergeant Scott Duff, and numerous others, were able to get a conviction for the cold-blooded, intentional murder of one of our brothers. So this starts back, again, on May 22nd, 1970. Officer Jim Sackett, who actually was just coming back after leave because he had taken time off after the birth of his son, Jerel, who's on the show with us today. First shift back, he ends up responding to a call about a woman who was apparently in labor and needed help. The call was a setup from the get. This was a planned, intentional sniping of one of our cops, and he was killed by a sniper who was identified 35 years after the fact as Ronald Reed, who is now in prison. And that's the reason we're doing this episode, is that this is the fourth time that this family had to go to the parole board and beg the parole board to keep the murder of their father in prison. And I'm so glad that they're willing to share their story. It demonstrates their courage and what they had to go through and are still going through today as a result of their father being shot and killed intentionally in the line of duty by an absolute animal who deserves to remain in prison the rest of his life. But what they're going through now seems so unjust. And I just really, for any of you that are watching or listening to this, please listen to these folks talk about their experience, how it's impacted them, how it impacted their childhoods, how it impacts them today, and how the system, in many cases, seems far more centered on suspects than victims. And as a St. Paul police officer, I can tell you that's one of the things I've noticed throughout my career is that professionally, certainly in the criminal justice system in the state of Minnesota, we have really started to focus far more on suspects and those convicted of crimes than the victims of those crimes. And that's just plain wrong. There are certain things in this society, if you do, the consequences dictate that you will never, ever be free again. Now, regardless of what happens when someone's incarcerated, sometimes whatever they did to end up in prison, they belong there forever, regardless of what changes they make, whether real or perceived. And it's really hard to tell sometimes with some of these people when they're in prison, when they're imprisoned for life, or they're facing the possibility of parole, what they'll say to regain their freedom. And again, in this particular case, I don't think this person should even be eligible for parole. However, because this heinous crime, this cold-blooded murder of a St. Paul police officer occurred in 1970, those are the laws that are applied today in terms of his parole possibility. Now, legislatively, I don't know if there's a fix for that, but I can tell you, after spending more time than I ever have with this family and listening to their story and being a part of this, I'm going to take a long, hard, close look at what could possibly be done legislatively so that this family doesn't have to go back to the parole board every 2 years and beg to keep this man incarcerated for the murder of their father. You might ask, what can you do? And that's one of the main reasons that we did this particular episode at this time is by July 14th, 2026, the parole board needs to hear from you. And the easiest way for you to reach out to the parole board and support this family and tell them there's absolutely no reason why this cop murderer should ever get out of prison, that's it. One sentence. So helpful for this family. And you can send an email to the parole board. It's Mnparole, standby. It's Mnparoleinput.doc at state.mn.us. Again, Mnparoleinput.doc at state.mn.us. Please, I am begging anybody to support this family by sending an email to the DOC and requesting that they keep this man locked up forever. It's an absolute injustice that this family has to be re-victimized every couple of years and go back to the parole board and explain to them what they've gone through and why it means so much to them that this man remain in prison for the rest of his life. Julie, Jim, Jerel, they were deprived of a father growing up because of Ronald Reed. Ronald Reed was convicted of this crime, and he's right where he should be, which is in prison, and he should never see the light of day as a free man again. Unfortunately, that's not the system that we're working with here. So with these three on this show today, they demonstrate a ton of courage and a lot of vulnerability and the willingness to tell this story, not only for themselves, but for other families in situations like this, where cold-blooded killers are allowed sometimes the opportunity to rejoin society. And again, there are certain things in your life, in this life, when perpetrated, folks that perpetrate certain crimes should never, ever see the light of day again as a free person. This is one of those cases. And after you listen to this story from Julie, Jim, and Jerel, I hope that you will come to find that Ronald Reed does deserve to spend the rest of his life in prison and should spend the rest of his life in prison, and create as much awareness about this as you possibly can. When this podcast airs, you're going to have about a week to get this done. The clock is ticking, and we need as much support as we can possibly get for this family to ensure that a cold-blooded killer never walks this earth as a free man again in his entire life. So thank you so much for tuning into episode 6. This is a special episode, and I thank Julie, Jim, and Jerel so much for being willing to come on and tell their story, because it's not an easy story to tell. So rest in peace to our brother, Jim Sackett. He made the ultimate sacrifice. And now his family, in his honor, are carrying on and trying to do what's right in his memory, not only for themselves, but for other survivors of incidents like this. It's an absolute tragedy. And please take the time to listen, watch. Most importantly, reach out to the parole board, send them an email. It'll take you 2 minutes to draft an email that says, please keep this cold-blooded murderer in prison, because that's exactly where he belongs. We have the Sackett siblings here with us. Their father, James, was tragically murdered in the line of duty in the early 1970s. It became a cold case. We didn't solve it for 35 years. The suspect in that case is up for parole now for the 4th time in the last 8 years. Is that correct?
Since 2019 was
Since
his
2019.
first.
So sadly, these folks with me today have had to go through this and relive this 3 times prior during parole hearings, and now they're up against it again. To your left, the far left, is Jerel. Immediately next to me is Jim Sackett, and we have Julie Sackett to your right. So we're just going to start by having Julie tell us a little bit about kind of where this all started and a little bit about where we're at today. So Julie, thank you.
Oh, okay. Just a little bit about the history about what happened with our father. On May 22nd, 1970, he went to plea for help, a woman that was calling in that said that there was a baby to be due. And when the officers arrived at the scene, my dad going to the front door and Officer Colthy going to the back door, A shot was heard, and my dad was on the ground, and he was killed that day. And it's been really hard on the police department. It's been hard on the family. It was very difficult the night that that the police came to my family home, and my mom had to answer the door and get that message that her husband was murdered. 35 years we waited. Tom Hauser broke the case open when he stopped and talked to Connie Trimble being the lady that made the phone call. And he asked her about the phone call, and she admitted at that time that she had made that phone call. It broke the case open. In 2005, Ronald Reed was indicted. He was tried by a jury of his peers, and he was convicted. And in 2006, he went to jail, and we thought that things were going to be okay. But the problem with this case is his sentencing was based on the laws of 1970. I kind of want to talk about that maybe a little longer later. And with that in mind, in 2019, after just 14 years in prison, we had to go to our first parole hearing. So the impact on our family has been immense. 35 years of waiting, not knowing. 14 years knowing that he was in prison. 5 weeks of trial. And now constantly having to beg the parole board to keep him in prison.
Do you feel like the parole board has been receptive to your thoughts? Or how about just, how do you view the parole board or the system handles victims' positions in general?
I don't think the parole board process is appropriate for the victims whatsoever. I don't think the entire legal system is appropriate for the victims. The parole board takes in letters. Of course, that's part of the reason that we're playing here for you guys today, to please write and help our family keep this man in prison, Ronald Reed. The parole process is not very welcoming to the families. I really felt a lot of distrust for them the very last time. I felt that they were people that already had made a decision that they were going to let him go, and we were just in there to try to convince them otherwise. Part of the parole process is the family has to go and talk to the parole board, and we do that in a closed session because we feel that that's a private thing for our family. And we talk to the parole board. We send in our letters prior to that. And after the family gets done talking, we sit in other rooms and watch on the computer while the murderer in this case gets to plead his story to the parole board. After that, we have no option of rebuttal. We have no say of what happens. The parole board sits and makes a decision based on what they hear last, in my mind. Not what they hear from the victims, but what they hear from the criminal.
And to me, it seems like every time you go through this, you're re-victimized. You have to relive all these things and hash out all these experiences that, I mean, I don't know, I can't imagine these are things you're never going to forget these things, but obviously you've moved on with your lives, and to have to go through this again every couple of years, I assume, has to be pretty challenging.
You get a little lull in between, the hearings, and then it's rehashed all over again. And then you hope it could be 3 years. We've asked for 5 before, and we're given 3 years in between. And this last one, he asked for an early hearing, which was granted. He felt he's done enough time, and it's time for him to go. And no, every 5 years, or just never again, and he just stays in permanently. Because the sentence was for life with possibility, but I don't think he should even get the possibility.
But that was the law at the time.
That was the law at the time. It's different now. Unfortunately, it can't be set up as it is now, even though it was tried in 2005. Yeah.
Well, with the crime taking place in the 70s, they go by that statute for the 70s, right? And I'm not growing up, I'll tell you. I'm pretty sure Julie had this experience too, because I was the baby. I was the 20-day-old. And
because your father had just come back from paternity leave, correct?
Well, my dad, I was born on the 2nd. My dad went back to work on the 22nd. He didn't have to go to that emergency call, but he, as a father, heard woman in labor, I'm going.
Yeah.
You know, he was supposed to come home. He was supposed to get off work, and it should have been, you know, someone else's job, but my dad said, no, I'm going to go do this. And he went. He did what he loved to do. He loved to be a police officer. He loved the East Side. He loved taking care of people. And it cost him his life. And as we, family, I always thought that I was going to get killed when I turned 27, which sounds kind of strange, but that's when my dad was killed. So growing up, I had that fear going on. And after all these years, we finally got enough information on the people that killed my father for what a merit badge, or whatever you got for doing such an act, you know, straight up murder. And then the person said, during the trial, he said, I will accept the punishment if it makes the family feel closure. And here we always are, going back, saying he deserves to stay in jail. Right? Now, we're back on the year that we get to go back and say, hey, look, this is what's going on. This is how we feel. This is what he did. Why is it that we have to defend our father and not have the criminal have to defend himself? He shows like he's being the victim here. It's the family that's the victim. You know, the parole board's really not set up that way because we wind up talking first. The criminal talks last. He has a chance to hear what has been said to us. And then he can tailor his speech accordingly. You know, so that's my 2 cents on that.
And to be clear, this was a premeditated, cold-blooded, intentional murder of a police officer.
Yes.
Correct.
We can talk a little bit about that. Some stuff that we learned while we were in trial, of course. We did find out that just a few days prior to our father being murdered, there was a trial run at a home just down the block. And the officers in that case went to the alleyway. And so it kind of foiled their plan with the sniper across the road, not having a clear shot. And they found that that visit at that home was unwarranted. So on the night that this happened, they used 859 Hague because there was no alleyway in the back. We also found a lot of other information about Ronald Reed and Larry Clark, who was also involved in it. During the trial process, they talked about the Montgomery Ward's bombing attempt and how Ronald Reed and Larry Clark were involved in that. Hijacking of an airplane. They had equipment and they had notes and they had plans for hijacking an airplane. And most importantly, a bank robbery down in Chicago. So we're talking about someone that has a career history of being a criminal. And we also found out during the trial that the motivation for killing a police officer was to gain clout with the Black Panther Party, and in hopes that they could establish a chapter in St. Paul. And they just thought that that would give them that kind of forward precedence to go ahead and have a Black Panther Party chapter in the cities. This was a racially motivated murder. It was against a police officer. And maybe the word's not racial that I need to say, but it was against a police officer. And they thought if they killed a police officer, and they actually said the word pig, that would give them their outstanding citizenship.
My feeling is, and I talk to, as a police officer, victims frequently about how they feel about the system and how they've been treated and the way the system works. And over the course of my career, I have watched societally, for sure in Minnesota, where our lawmakers have really taken a position where they seem to be much more focused on suspects than they are the victims. What's been your experience, and how do you all feel about that and the way that victims are treated after they've gone through something like this, with respect or in comparison to the suspects themselves?
Well, the suspect, I mean, they get all the legal help they want and backing and support and everything they need. A lot of times, with us, we're doing the footwork trying to get this with the podcast and making phone calls to sheriff's office, deputies, the BCA, anybody we can to get backing to write in to keep him in there so that he doesn't get out. Because if this had happened today, there'd be no question about it. They're in for life, done, said and done. But because this has to be under 70 law, we're back scraping every 2 to 3 years. Let's keep them in. And we start all over again.
And Jim makes a really good point. I think that needs to get changed. I think when you murder somebody, I don't care if it happened 80 years ago. If you are found guilty of that situation, you should get whatever the current sentencing guidelines are. It shouldn't be retroactive. It should be current.
And now that he's older, I fully expect him to say that I'm no longer a threat to society and I should be let loose. But as far as I know, nowhere in the guidelines does it say, based on your age, we'll adjust the time for you. Life is life, regardless of the criminal's age. Should not get out early just because he's old.
And you all have been sentenced to a life without your father.
Yeah, we don't get parole. We don't get a hearing. He can have visitors. He can make phone calls. He can get letters. We've got a tombstone.
Yeah, and obviously you all, owe a debt. Probably feel some gratitude towards Tom Hauser, but also retired Sergeant Tom Donaski and retired Sergeant Jane Mead and retired Sergeant Scotty Duff for the work that they put in. How do you feel about their work and their support throughout all this? How was that experience?
I know I never had a chance to thank them as well as I'd like to. I've been in contact with Donansky's son, and he's going to take me over so I can go see Jane Mead.
Good.
Scotty's kind of disappeared, so I got to figure that one out. So I'll find him though. And
we like to do that when we retire a lot of times in this profession. That's my choice sometimes.
Everyone goes south,
Yeah.
so stay warm. But I also would like to have thanked Harrington. He was the chief. Mm-hmm. He didn't say much, but his actions meant everything to me. When we were at the trial, he sat down with the family. Okay, this being a black individuals against a white individuals, with the black chiefs supporting the officers and the officers' family. That meant the world to me. And those 3 officers and Tom Hauser that sat and continued and got where we were at that day. Unfortunately, 30-some years later, it is what it took. So, how do I feel as shall I say, surviving family member? There's so much that I would miss, but I was only 20 days old. And I had my father's father, my grandfather, and my grandmother checking in on me and my sisters and my brother. So I missed, playing ball with Dad. I missed the discipline that your father gives, good or bad, right? A lot of times, and I've talked about this before, that people have said, we'll never forget. Well, it's been 56 years. You do forget. But I don't forget, and I won't forget. Being the youngest of the family, if I'm around until I'm 90, I might be the last one standing, I'm going to still be coming. I think my dad's story and all the officers who've become victims, their families need to be supported. not just a once a year service that we go to, which I appreciate, but it's once a year. You have how many officers on the department? They're not going to remember. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate you all willing to share that with us, because this is another way to get your story out. And people will remember when they watch this, and they will take interest in this, and they listen to just the raw emotion from you all. And as you explain your experiences then throughout your childhood and with this now these parole board hearings and the system itself, because I know that the system does not, it's not fair by any means. I wouldn't want any other system in the world, but I think we can do things better here, and I will certainly commit to all of you to further examining how this works with these cold cases where people get tried under previous guidelines and laws, and how we can change this, because it certainly doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't sit well from an outsider looking in with me. The fact that you'll have to go through this every couple of years, it doesn't seem right by any account.
Thank you. The first parole hearing after the 14 years of incarceration, our family brought our heart into the conversation. We discussed all the things that we missed in our life. Being walked down the aisle when you get married, learning how to ride a bike, how do I cut the grass, how do I fix a car, just all the things that we miss out on in our life, important dad details that weren't there on the father-daughter dance, that weren't there when your first boyfriend broke up with you and broke your heart, and those kind of things. We pled to the parole board about the losses in our life. And then the second parole hearing at the 16-year mark, we did a little bit of that, but we started talking about the system and why are we having to go through this, and what has he done to try to better himself so he can get out of prison. Has he done anything? Has he done any of the guidelines necessary to be released on parole? And a big part of that is he had to take certain kinds of classes and stay out of trouble, and I'm discipline free and things like that. At the first parole hearing that we went to at the 14-year mark, he had taken no classes. He had done nothing. He shows no remorse. After he figured that out, he started doing little bits of those kind of things, taking little classes here and there, and trying to make it look like he had created a better life. He was going to be a better person. I think it's farce. I don't believe it whatsoever. As a matter of fact, there is something, they kind of call it the vault, but it's the Department of Corrections letter safe kind of thing. And it's for the people that are asking for parole to express remorse and write a letter, and once it gets approved by the DOC, then it can get put into accepted. Okay, you have empathy, you take accountability, you show remorse. He has written a letter like that, and it has not been approved because he doesn't fit the criteria. He hasn't taken those steps to prove that he wants to be let out. And then with the constant having to continue, we asked for 3-year continuance. We got it one time. I asked for 3 years. Now, 2 years later, now we have to go back again. And if you actually look at the Minnesota Judicial Branch website and search for Ronald Reed, you can look at all of the cases that are on there, all of the thousands of pages of documents he has tried to send into the court to get himself free and out of prison. And yes, he has a right to do that, but he even did it after the very last parole hearing, fighting the process of the parole hearing. It's like 120 pages long, and he's just not accepting accountability.
I mean, I would say even if he had accepted accountability at this point in his life, there are some decisions in life, and I think that anybody who commits a premeditated, first-degree intentional murder, especially on a police officer, those that are supposed to protect all of us, that are going out there to protect people they don't even know. I mean, your father just came back. It's his first shift back after you were born, Jerel. And like you said, that call, I know it resonated with him, because as a cop, those calls do resonate with you. After, especially I can speak from my own experience, I know my colleagues can as well, after you've had children, your perception of these calls changes. And you're more compelled than maybe you were before, because now you know what it's like to father a child or parent a child. And so for somebody that deliberately takes his life, even if we were reformed, which I don't necessarily, I don't believe it. I think these people will tell you they are, because what is their alternative? Their alternative is to just sit in prison, which is where they belong forever. But they have no other alternative. So what else are they going to say? I mean, he wants his freedom back. But again, in life, I think some people, and most would agree, that sometimes you make a decision and the consequence is you're going to be confined for the rest of your life. I think this qualifies. Yeah. I think it's wrong that you all have to go through this every 2 years. It's a sad state we're in.
He had his freedom. He had 35 years of freedom after murdering my father. We're sentenced to life. We have to do this for the rest of our life. Please talk a little bit about that 35-year gap where you knew your father had been murdered in cold blood by somebody. In the case, it was cold. It was tough. Nobody would talk. Yeah. What's that like, those 35 years, just wondering? I mean, it's always on your mind, I assume.
It's knowing he's out there, and they're doing whatever they want to do. Look at his record. Clearly shows he was not an outstanding citizen. We grew up knowing they had their freedom. We know they did it. Everybody knows they did it. And everything it was just waiting and waiting. And they'd get a little bit of a break, and the case, somebody might say something, then restart it again, and then nothing. And we'd wait, and we'd hope they'd get some kind of conviction, preferably, before our grandma and grandpa died, so they knew that the killer was caught. Our grandpa didn't. He wound up dying before the trial and everything. My grandma did survive long enough to know it, but her health was so poor she didn't really remember it. But we waited and waited and waited. And then finally something came through. But it's always knowing they're there. Where are they? Are they still on the east side? What are they doing? Are we going to be next? Jerry brought up about
well, Jerry said he thought that he was also going to die at the age of 27, and that's something that he carried with him.
Mm-hmm. We all felt that. And
at least I feel a little bit safer knowing that he's behind bars, and one of them's gone. That's a little okay with me. Yeah. But even to this day, you kind of wonder, well, if they do wind up getting out, then what happens? Because I guarantee no one's going to protect us. I'm going to have to protect myself and my family. I'm going to have my family, not just my brothers and sisters and mother. So growing up without the father, knowing that he was killed, the murders are out there somewhere, worrying about someone coming after our family, finish off our family. And then having people come up to me, and I remember in high school, this one teacher stood up and he talked about my father without me knowing about it. And he wound up seeing me right after his class. He stayed behind the desk, about 4 or 5 feet behind it, because I was over the top upset that you're talking about my father without one of us being there. What are you saying, good or bad? What about the people that killed my father? So what are you saying, good or bad about them? Preferably bad, because that's what they were, and they still are to us, at least to me, myself. My father, he did what he loved. That's just the thing, and he didn't deserve to pay the ultimate price for trying to help somebody. Nowadays you see a lot of officers that are afraid. They have that brief pause before they take those calls, before they get out of the vehicles, before they confront somebody. one, you might wind up going to jail for making a mistake. Or two, you're gonna get killed over some stupid reason. Someone stole a piece of gum, or someone's trying to prove to their buddy, hey, look, I can take them. You know? For us, every couple of years to go back and say, hey, this guy deserves to stay in jail because of. No. He needs to actually have his remorse. He needs to stay. And like my sister Julie has just said, that he stayed for 14 years and didn't do a thing. And you were free for 30-some years too, you know. Did anything really change in the past couple of years? Just because you're older doesn't mean you should get downgraded into a different jail and to a lower minimal security jail. That's why. You're still a threat to us.
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable. That's not paranoia. These are the real raw feelings that you all have experienced throughout your lives, and still to this day.
You know, we waited 35 years. The witnesses that finally came forward were afraid of him for 35 years. He was never a nice guy to begin with. I mean, his friends were afraid of him, and all of a sudden he goes in and, oh, I'm a changed man. Well, you're changed because you're in prison. That's a given. But there is no remorse. He has never said, I did this. He's never taken responsibility. And even if he does, he still deserves to stay in there for life. It's a possibility of parole, not a granted parole. No matter how many things he does in there, does not deserve to get out. And every 2 years to 3 years, we go through this again and again. And it's the same thing. I'm a changed man. I've found Jesus. They all seem to say that. And now he's going to say with the age. And he should not get out.
He shouldn't get out, whether it's age, ailment, or whatever the situation is, because that's been brought up already to us too. And I do really believe that the parole board is going to let him out at some point in the near future. If not this one, the one after. But as long as we have to, our family, this group of kids with our mother, we're gonna keep fighting. We're gonna keep asking for the community to help us. We're gonna keep begging and pleading with every agency that we can find to write in letters and help us. Because something has to be done, and if this is all we've got is people like you that can help us, and Facebook and us calling everybody in the community, then that's what we're going to have to keep doing. And so if he gets, let's hope he stays for another 3 years, hopefully, before we have to have another parole review. We'll see you then, because we're going to be back.
Well, and with the parole hearings, you can't just say, here's a list of things to do this list and you get out. It's not homework. There's no, to me it doesn't even make sense.
I know that Jim was saying about doing the homework, and I had brought up the last hearing was, how many hours did he actually work on what he said he's working on? And they wouldn't tell me. So that's kind of odd, because if I worked on something 1 minute, I'm legally allowed, I can say that I'd worked on this. Yeah, but if you've been in there for 14 years, why haven't you worked on it for 14 years? Or why haven't you worked on 20 years or 50 years or whatever?
The day you got in, if you're remorseful and you wanted to make yourself better, the day you got in, you should have started it. This last one, he started this list 3 months before the hearing, and came in and said, here's what I've done.
And it's not stuff that's just given to us. I mean, we have to fight and request. We have a victim's advocate. I won't use her name, but she's been very helpful to us. We have to come forward with the questions and say, what has he done? What classes has he taken? Has he asked for remorse? Has he had a mental health assessment, a risk assessment if they're going to put him in the community? We have to keep asking this stuff. Does he have family support? You know, we have to keep pushing this stuff forward so we know we can say, hey, these are the reasons he's not ready yet. He doesn't pass a risk assessment. He doesn't show remorse. He hasn't written a vault letter. You know, he's not taking any classes, and it's just ridiculous that they would even consider a second review 2 years after the first one when he hadn't done anything. 14 years of nothing. And now we're at year 20. And I'm waiting for some of the answers to the things I was just speaking of right now, because all of that has to be approved. I can ask for what classes, but I have to wait for the approval to come through. So the parole hearing isn't until August for our family to have to go sit through again. But I have to start preparing in January. So I get 1 year of a break, and then I have to start preparing again. We all do. Sorry, I'm just getting a little angry with that
as
one.
you should, and you have every right to. So as we sit here now, what would you say to anybody watching this that isn't familiar with the case or familiar with you or isn't in the law enforcement world? What kinds of things can the average citizen in Minnesota do to help your family and families like yours so that we can change this? Or let's say we can't even change it. What can we do to assure that Ronald Reed does not get out of prison ever? Ideally, we can look into some legislative fixes if indeed that's even a possibility. So I think I pledge to you I will do my part there and try and potentially push legislation if it's possible to make sure this doesn't happen to families like yours. And I don't, and the appetite at the Capitol to get anything done is always challenging, but it's certainly worthwhile. But to the average person, what can they do to help your family and families like yours?
They can easily Google the name, and it comes up. Usually the first one, it's his black and white picture with the story. Read the story. And then there's also, like third or fourth one down, Julie's got a Facebook page on there. And then down below that is a case on it that reviews his petitions and so forth. You can read what he's asking for and why they've repeatedly been denied. And right into the parole board, send them messages. There's their website. Just send in as many as we can. Get anybody in law enforcement that can, say he deserves to be in. It's life in prison with possibility of parole. It doesn't have to have parole. And if we're changing it now, it'd be up to this legislation on that.
And we're up against the timeline right now. These letters need to be sent to the parole board by what date?
They have to be by the parole board by July 14, because the hearing is going to be August 11. So they need to be in by then.
So July 14th, we need people to send their emails to the parole board. Do you have that email address handy? If not, I have it. I will provide it to the people.
I was going to have it on my paper.
Okay, don't worry about it. I will make sure that everybody who watches this or listens to this has that email address.
Yes, and if you can't email, there is an address as well to write in letters if you have to handwrite letters. But we've gotten great community feedback right now. People that are willing to write letters and people that have sent me some of the letters that they've written, like the Police Federation and groups like that. Another thing people can do to help us is to share this story on as many pages as possible, because the greater the reach of people that can hear the story, the greater possibility we're going to have with positive feedback to the parole board. So any page you can share it to, we would appreciate that. And we do. We thank the police department. They've been there for our family at the 50-year mark of our father's murder. The police department did a great thing, and many officers drove by my mom's house and showed their respect and gave her flowers and showed us love, that they did not forget about us. And the police community itself is a family. Once you're a police officer, wife or child or husband or whatever situation, even brother or sister, you're always part of that family and that community. So we do want to thank everyone that has showed us that kind of support in our family as well, the police family, that is.
Good. Well, I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability and willingness to come on and share your story with us and anybody who watches and listens to this. Gentlemen, do you have anything in closing or anything you'd like to add for people? Please, it's this is your time to tell the story and let people know how you're feeling and what we think we need to do to fix this.
For me, this is not about black and white issue.
Right.
It never has. It hasn't been.
Growing up, I didn't think about the black and white issue. All I thought ever about was someone, three individuals, taking the life of my father. No color, no nothing, not racist. Someone did something to my family and wrecked my family, took away something from me. They deserve to pay for it, you know. You're going to hear a lot nowadays about, oh, this is racist, this is whatever. No, it's not about that. It's about what you did, taking accountability for what you've done. You know, so.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned, is growing up knowing that part's missing and never having it again.
Well, I think it speaks to the character of you all to not have any racial animus as a result of this. You've gone through your lives without that. That's not what angers you. It's certainly not what caused this. Somebody took your father's life. And that's real. And regardless of race, sex, religion, you name it, doesn't matter.
They did it because he was a police officer, and that's a warning almost to all the other officers out there. I worry about them just as much every day when they go out. Are they going to make it home? Is their family going to have to suffer the same consequences our families had to suffer?
Well, again, you guys didn't paint anybody with a broad brush, and you make a point here that brings up a couple things. As cops, we get painted with a broad brush all the time, right? And that your father was a victim of that. That still continues today. That hasn't changed. We're still all painted with a broad brush. If one police officer on the other side of the country does something that he or she should not have done, we pay the price for it here in St. Paul, believe it or not. Just like with Floyd, Derek Chauvin, the entire world felt the ill effects of that. Cops everywhere. They had nothing to do with any of it.
You never hear all
the good cops.
Yeah.
It's 99.9% of cops.
It's not the greatest news to hear that the chief of Rogers had held onto the car so that the people could get out of the car that was trapped in the river. What about the chief that jumped into the river a few years back too, trying to save somebody who's hanging onto the vehicle in uniform and waited for help to come for them? I didn't remember seeing that on the news, but I know this has happened.
And I will tell you, our rank and file cops in St. Paul and all over the state and all over the country, to be honest, save people's lives every day. Yeah. All day, every day. They go out and they just do the job. Yeah. And most of it nobody ever knows or hears about. But in one of those things, as a cop, one of the reasons you do the job is it is a calling, but cops know when they go home, they feel good about themselves. I mean, when you've risked your life for someone else's, or you've had a positive impact and changed somebody else's lives, I mean, that's really why you do this job. It's not because we get paid a ton of money or work great hours or want to lead a stress-free life. You do this job because it is a calling. And to your point, certainly the men and women of the St. Paul Police Federation are heroes. And they're out there every day. Those cops that are out there in squad cars taking 911 calls for service, and our investigators that are inside digging into these crimes, they're passionate, hardworking, honest, high-integrity people. And I'm certainly proud to represent and serve them as a cop. And it's tough. And we're at a time now where assaults on police officers have increased. There's been an uptick in those the last couple of years. And the job just seems to get more and more dangerous by the day. Well, we're grateful for their work and some good investigative journalism combined with good police work. And we got the correct result. Unfortunately, now we're at this place in the process.
We have to do it every few years, all over again.
So it's kind of like we constantly have to go to court. Mm-hmm. For the rest of, my life maybe. I'll have to keep going. My sister, my brother, my mom, go back and say, he deserves this because, and that's going to be what my life will look like for every couple of years, 2-3 years.
This system is broken. They're letting career criminals out to reoffend, to hurt people in the community. And I'm not just talking about this case, I'm talking about many cases. I know of people that have gotten out after being in jail over and over again for theft just to be a reoffender. Whereas this is a soft on crime situation. It's time to be tough on crime. If you make the sentences to the point that people like, if I do this thing, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison, or in some states executed, people are going to think twice before they make those terrible, unlawful mistakes. Our broken system needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that stuck with me a little earlier. And you essentially this happens every 2 years, but you're re-victimized every year because you have a year before you have to start preparing for the next hearing.
Yep.
So you'll get, let's say things go as they should this time around, and Ronald Reed is not released from prison, which he should not be. You have about a 1 year reprieve, and then you have to start preparing again.
Start all over.
For the hearing the year after that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's shameful to have to be re-victimized constantly. You've gone through enough. Again, and this isn't just, I really appreciate you all coming on, because as cops, one of the things you think about, there are times where you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why are we doing this? And please just keep fighting, because that's why cops go into their jobs every day for families like yours. That's why they keep going to work. And our young cops, especially, folks, that we have a lot of young cops in our police department. I guarantee you aren't familiar with this story. And even people like myself that have been on 25 years, this is a great refresher for them about what your family has gone through. And what our predecessors, what investigators, the legendary Tom Donaski and Jane Mead and Scotty Duff, and what they did to help your family. And again, that's what it's about. That's why we get in this job, help families like yours. So please keep fighting. Don't ever quit. Because I can tell you, it serves as motivation for cops to go out and continue doing the job. Because like I said, there are times where you'll wonder, you'll be like, gosh, there's so many other things I could be doing that aren't nearly as stressful. They're not as challenging, not as mentally taxing, you name it. We just keep going. But thank you. I'm telling you, this serves as motivation for the cops out there doing the job to this day. So keep fighting the fight. And this is just one small thing this union can do, the St. Paul Police Federation can do on the Blue Saints podcast for your family, is to get the message out. And it's heartfelt, and people need to hear this story. So again, I'm very, very appreciative. Happy they're willing to share it. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this story. It's heartfelt. It's emotional. It's important. And to families across the state of Minnesota, the St. Paul Police family, and actually throughout our nation, for families whose loved ones are dealing with similar situations, our heart goes out to you. And this is one way through the Blue Saints podcast that we can deliver this message and hopefully just shed some light on our system and some of the failures in our system and some things that maybe need to be repaired within the system. And again, most importantly, please, 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 I beg you, email the parole board, send them the email, it'll take you a minute or two, and remind them that Ronald Reed needs to remain in prison for the rest of his life. These folks, our guests today, Julie, Jim, and Jerel, grew up without a father. They're deprived of the opportunity to grow up with a father because of what this animal did and he belongs in prison for the rest of his life, and he should never, ever see the light of day as a free man again. Thanks again. Take care, and we'll see you next time.